this very wise librarian, she said, sometimes it's good not to have the stuff. So when, like, if you hold on to an old set of dictionaries because you can't afford a new one, if you have it there, people are going to see it and say, oh, they got it. Encyclopedias, they got the encyclopedias. Where if you don't have it, people are going to start questioning why you don't have encyclopedias, and they'll talk to, whoever the people who control your purse strings are, the city council, and they'll say, the library needs a new set of encyclopedias, and that's how you'll get funding, as opposed to keeping stuff and people thinking, oh yeah, they got it. So it's wise to weed.
And from a database perspective, it's almost exclusively financial. The main consideration is, of course, do we have enough money to keep these things? Because we do try to get resources based on a perceived need in from the public. However, usage is a huge component of that as well. We track monthly stats in terms of the number of sessions, searches, and document views for each database. And if something's not getting used and it's costing us money, we will wind up dropping it.
And how do you gauge that use?
Well, it's based on, I'd like to look at the number of document views as my indicator. My thinking is that you can count the number of times people go to the database site, but if they go there and don't find what they're looking for, the session counts, but so it makes it seem like the database is being used, but it's not really useful. Similarly, if you count the number of searches, you can get a sense that the database is being heavily used, but if people aren't finding any results with their searches, they may need 10 searches to get an article that they can use. So I like to look at the number of full text document views. I think that's so far the closest I can come to finding a objective measure of how much something is being used. Of course, some of the resources don't offer full text, but the vast majority of the things we have are in full text. And then I can take the numbers, again, I gather these on a monthly basis, and I will have spreadsheets where I put in the price of the database and the number of document views, and number of sessions, and number of searches, do division and find out if it's costing us, $5 for every legal form from our database, when you can go across the street and buy the legal form for $1 a piece. We'll drop that legal forms database and save $4 per form.
And then I guess you mentioned kind of the budget and that tied to usage. I'm kind of wondering, with going from a floating, or I guess a single ownership of an item to now a floating collection, how has that affected budget, the process of collection development?
Well, actually, it's made it, I guess I would say, easier, because we've been, for most of my tenure as a manager of the collection development office, we've been floating now, and with my selectors, we look at it as a system-wide viewpoint. And obviously we do take in, it's a big system, and we do take in, there's differences, like if somebody's, one branch says, we have a lot of horse people here. When we originally select books on horses, that might be their first landing place. And then we'll see where it goes. But it's made, when I first started, each branch used to have a budget. And with 29 locations, that's just really hard to work at. I mean, both for acquisitions and finance. So we just coalesced it into one budget, which we break up into different funds. We have funds for like adult text, adult AV, or talking books, children's, and so on, Spanish. And we've divided that up by how much we can spend per month. And then we try to meet the needs the best we can per month. And we look at what the profiles are, what people are requesting. It's kind of like a science and an art at the same time. There's no perfect way of doing it, but from a system-wide perspective, we'll see, how, I mean, obviously one of our larger branches that has a huge turnaround and a large circulation is going to get more books than a little tiny branch that might only circ maybe 700 books a week or something like that.
I think.
And shared collections though too. People can call stuff from one branch to another. So in a way, if they did originally have this material, they can always have it brought in.
And I think the floating collection was more a response to the budget than that the budget has responded to our moving to floating collections. Floating collections allows us to operate more efficiently, I think. So as the budgets have decreased, floating collections was more of a response to that. If we break up the money among each of the different branches, the cost is considerably higher. For example, if you're keeping 5 copies of a title on the shelves at a branch, but not more than one of them ever checks out at any given time, while you have to get 5 copies for another branch where they could check out 6 or 7. So by sharing the collection, you save money by not needing to keep those 5 separate, or 5 copies at each branch. You can have just those 10 to meet the whole demand. And I think
that's good.
That is kind of. I don't think that our budget has decreased as a result of switching to shared collections, but I think to some extent we switched to shared collections so as to be able to accommodate a decrease in the budget.
And an expanding system too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Were you surprised by anything when you went to floating collections? That you learned something about a community that you didn't know because of where things were winding up or landing?
Well,
About the librarians.
Yeah, we learned more about staff, I think, than the communities themselves. But also, the certain things where, books that people said wouldn't check out at their branch are at their branch. So it's like it's great to know your community, but unless you're there 24/7 or for every minute the library's open, and there seems to be like there are some people who are, but they there's people kind of choose what they want, and certain stuff lands somewhere. It was like knitting books landed at this branch where this woman said, "I have no knitters," and well, obviously you have people who are either stopping by there, and that's still a patron who uses your library who's leaving off knitting materials, or you do have knitters. And for a while there was people who, yes, we're all for shared collections, but there's too many books on knitting, so we have to get rid of them, as opposed to leaving stuff on the shelf and let people move them around. And that's where, like, we talked about weeding a little while ago, and that's really important too, to leave. If you weed, you can have room on your shelf for new materials. That's one thing we're finding too, is we look at our what's new at the library, and it's usually waiting list for it, or they're all checked out. And people sometimes are getting rid of brand new materials just because we call it lazy weeding, where I'll just get rid of the dupe. And by getting rid of a dupe, what you're doing is basically only having one thing on your shelf, and once that's gone, somebody has to reserve it and wait for it. If you have dupes, like, that's one thing too that we've done is, like, for books on plumbing or baby names, I'll buy multiple copies of only maybe 3 or 4 titles. So when you go to the branch, you're not going to somebody's not going to take, oh, there's 7 books about baby names, I'm going to take each one out, and then there'll be nothing left for somebody else. If there's only 4 titles on baby names, I mean 600,000 baby names, so you're covering that. The most they can check out is, they're going to check out is 4, and then there'll be other copies of those same titles there for somebody else who needs a baby name book. Not on every subject. There's certain subject areas, obviously, like philosophy, or and that you can want maybe a larger array of materials on that subject. But there's certain things like plumbing for most people, household plumbing, baby names, I don't know, some other books, but that's what we work on too.
I think also, the thing that the shared collection kind of points out is that, first of all, the public has a broader interest than you really realize when you're working at the desk. We did get feedback from a lot of librarians who said, we're never going to check out, these romance titles, or, I don't want copies of these